welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to talk about the power of enlightenment, universal enlightenment. Today on the show, we have a young lady that has had a extraordinary journey. I listened to her story with deep interest, deep respect, and more importantly, deep understanding. Welcome to the show, Kendra. And I told her I'm going to use this last name because I really like it, but she's going to tell you her full name. Dances on Water. Welcome to the show, baby girl. How are we doing?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So tell the viewers what your true real name is, because I like the dancing on water. What does your name really represent? Because it's odd that a lot of us really never thought about what our name actually represents and what it means. Tell the viewers before we get started exactly what your name is and how you broke it down to me.
Well, I mean, from the beginning of time, our name always was what we were, who we are. It's only in recent times where, names are so flippant. People are so, they don't listen to what the child is saying. It's in ancient cultures, we would sit out by a tree and we would wait for the spirit of the child to come to us before we ever were even pregnant. And then the child would tell us who they are. They would reveal themselves to us. So my name means Kendra, prophetess, which is also my archetype in Mayan astrology. And Anastasia means resurrection. And Dansereau means dances on water.
That is a powerful name. So let's get right down to this. I know this story may be a little bit over for some people to understand, but this is what I need to let people know before we even go down this story. This is her journey. Listen with compassion and understanding and not be judgmental is what I'm saying. This is her journey, and we all travel down different roads, but we need to listen because she has a great story. So let's start first by talking about a little bit about the Divine Mother Ministry and how that came about and how that ties into your story.
So in 2020, I started to awaken to the Divine Mother, and the Divine Mother would channel through me. And I kept hearing, like, you're here to be the embodiment of love. That is the comforter, the Divine Mother. And so there's many of us that are walking as the embodiment of the Holy Spirit. And that's a very difficult role to fulfill upon this planet. But I feel like our ministry is what we're about. We all have a ministry. It doesn't matter. It's never doesn't need to be tied to religion or anything like that. So I am the founder of Divine Mother Ministry, which will eventually stand for many divine mothers standing together in holistic practices.
Is this simply for females? Can a male also have this Divine Mother?
Absolutely. It's not a gender. The Divine Mother is within us all. We all have our masculine and feminine, but the Divine Mother, it's like the father aspect of God is he's the light and he's holding the frequency in heaven. And then the mother, when all of the children went down to heaven or down from heaven, the mother manifested everything in our experience. So the Divine Mother is everywhere. It's in everything.
You said we all have some type of divine enlightenment. I guess that's the word I can use with inside us, but you've actually experienced these transformations. Just take us down. Let's start the journey. You as a child, what was that like? Because, and then talk about. You know what? I'm gonna let you tell it. Just talk about your childhood first before I ask this question.
Well, I can remember choosing into this world. I can remember sitting and being like a guardian or a way shower from the other side, and speaking whispers into um, people's ears to go left or right. And then I can remember, for a lack of better words or for a human perspective, it felt like I was like sitting on the sidelines of like a basketball game, and then the coach comes over and says, "You're in." And then I can remember going to pick my parents. And I can even remember the two other parents that I had to choose from. And it's so interesting because then later in life, I actually met one of the women.
Really?
And she had this recognition towards me as well. It was such an interesting feeling that unless you've experienced it,
Right.
you can't really describe it. But it was the same kind of feeling the first time I saw my daughter, when I had a C-section and she was crying, and they brought her over to me. And the moment I looked into her eyes and I said, "Megan," she stopped crying. And I believed in past lives at that moment, because I knew that I knew her. And, that was the first time ever laying eyes on her.
So this is
So,
almost like the City of Angels movie, so to speak. Like you started out as almost like a spiritual guidance where you're whispering into mortals' ears, telling them turn right, turn left, turn left. But you're seeing this from a higher plane, from a heavenly realm. Am I correct? So to
from
speak?
God's world, yeah.
And now you get but you seeing all of this play out, because this is almost like the movie with Nicolas Cage. You see what's going on. You see people on the other plane, which is Earth, and we're talking, we're doing everything, but you're still a enlightenment or energy. And all of a sudden, who's calling you to say you're up to bat? You
It's the
know,
creator. So the father aspect of God.
so the father aspect of God sees you, says, "Hey, you're up now." These are he picked the people and said, "Okay, well, you get to choose who's going to be your parents, who's going to
Well,
basically you're getting ready to write the script of your life." Am I correct?
um, well, we have free will. So we set specific intentions when we come down. And that is often like the pain, because so many people are suffering on this planet because they come through the veil of ego illusions and they forget what their purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
But every single person, if you're here on this planet right now, you're an enlightened soul. Like, you chose to be here at this time during the great transition. Like, you have such a big mission and you just forgot. And so it's disheartening to think about people not wanting to be here on this planet when they literally they took like they had to apply for the position. Like, not every single energy can come down and be physically incarnated. And
So the
so we
people that actually came here, let me see if I can roll with you. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm trying to keep enlightening myself as well as we journey down your path, because I'm learning from you as well. So when you use the word free will, and I remember I'm trying to go back into that movie where Nicolas Cage was in love with a human, and he came down, and once he came down, he wasn't able to contact all of those people that his angels or his guiding spirits that he was so closely related to. So my question here is, I know this probably is a lot to shoot at you, but why does that happen when we come here? Like Adam and Eve take from the tree and all of a sudden, things change and stuff. Why does this happen? And why are we being treated like puppets if there's a greater entity above us?
because of judgment.
Give me a little bit more clarity on that, because of judgment.
So the moment that we judge, we separate from God. We fall in consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
There's a you and there's a me. And that is not Christ. And so it's only when we put on the mind of Christ, or we're walking in that Christ consciousness, where we can perceive the way that God perceives and sees. And so the I'm not familiar with this movie that you're speaking of, but like I'm now curious to go watch it.
It's called
Um,
the City of Angels. City of Angels,
like Los Angeles.
with Meg Ryan and Nicholas Cage and a couple other great actors that were in it. But go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
So yeah, you can have you're fully connected to the divine, and then you come through. And because we have to put on the veil, so to speak, in order to come through um and to perceive at this level of density, we all have separate egos. And so that's when we, lose our connection, we forget. But the moment that we choose out, we die, we get that awareness, that full recognition. That's why a lot of people devote their lives to spiritual practices, because they're trying to remember while they're still incarnated.
When did we lose the judgment? When do you think we lost the judgment? You said judgment. When did this actually take place? Because a lot of people, something that you told me when we was talking, you didn't surround yourself with any type of spiritual or biblical literature. You
Right? Not
you, you
not until
speak
this
from
last year.
experience, which I thought was like really odd that for you to never read religious material that has been installed upon us to be so enlightened yourself. But when did the judgment take place for what, from what you consider for mere humans, for us?
In the Garden of Eden. And so a lot of people think that it's the tree of good and evil,
Right.
but that's not true, because good and evil is a judgment. So it's the tree of knowledge, or the tree of judgment. But it's not like it's not gnosis, because to be in gnosis, you know all, you're in Christ consciousness. But to put it more accurately, it is the tree of judgment. So it's when we start naming things, the moment that, like Jesus says, the moment that we see this and we call it a table, we can't see it for what it really is. And that's just like when we have partnerships.
I got you. Yeah.
Like, you're always like this. We wake up every single day and you're like, oh, this person again. Or, you have your rose colored glasses and everything they do is perfect. You're not giving them an opportunity to reveal themselves of who they are. You're not taking that curiosity as a child to look with brand new eyes. And that's why Jesus says it takes the heart or mind of a child in order to get into the kingdom of heaven, because you have to be in that curious spirit that is not in judgment, that is open to miracles and wonder, in order to perceive the kingdom of heaven on earth.
If we have free will, and I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but you've got if you want to call it third eye opening. I got to ask the questions. If you're sitting there with the divine, and this is, I mean, you shared this. This isn't the first time that I've heard what you're saying, but naturally being curious and human, I got questions to ask. If you're sitting next to the creator and he says, "Hey, you're up," why are we being treated the way we're doing, like a movie script? Like, why is it becoming such a difficult journey if the creator has created us and wants us to be enlightenment? Why is he making the journey so hard? And more importantly, why does it have to be a journey?
Well, that's not God's doing. That's our doing. So we asked to create a world where we could learn through contrast. And that is what this world is. And you could say it's the Divine Mother because the Divine Mother is everything that manifests. But it's with our thoughts and intentions, our deeds and our judgments, that manifest the reality that we experience. So you feel like you shared a story with me about a man who was constantly called the N-word.
Right.
But there was something going on pre-birth intention, something he was carrying from a previous lifetime, where he felt, separated. He felt different. He felt ostracized, and he's carrying that into this life. And if he were to surrender and forgive himself for that judgment that he cast upon himself originally, then he wouldn't see it reflected in the outside mirrors that we see.
Mm. When you say that the canal, this is something that I definitely got to ask. You go through the light. Let's just call it the light. I'm trying to talk in languages that people can kind of understand a little bit
Well,
deeper.
even if you think about like a wedding veil, like it's literally a veil over our eyes. And it causes us to see in duality. It causes us to see a this and a that instead of like in the oneness of what actually is.
How many times do you think that you have been here?
Well, I know that I always come in the beginning and in the end. So most humans, they keep reincarnating. They call it the cycles of life, but I call it the cycles of death because life is just living. It doesn't need to die. And so it's just like Yeshua or Jesus. He came through and his first lifetime where okay, so basically he's the one speaking to Moses and guiding all of the prophets throughout the Bible. But eventually he goes, all right, they're just not getting it. So I'm going to come down in human form. In his first lifetime, he walks as Joshua. And the only reason why I know this is because this year he told me that I needed to take myself through the 1 year Bible. But it wasn't until my consciousness was able to receive it in a way where I wouldn't be crucified by it, because the Bible can be used as a blessing or a curse depending on your level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So he took me through it this year, and it was so clear to me that Joshua was his first incarnation. And you look how primal Joshua was. Like, yes, he was looked at as like he did so much for them, but he hung the kings up by the trees and then put them in a cave and put a rock in front of where he buried them, which is exactly what happened to him later by those same people when he came as Jesus. So even he was fulfilling his own karma, but he also walked as Buddha. So it's silly to me that we have like these differentiations of like, oh, my God's better than your God.
When he basically has come and
right,
manifested into these different forms,
right.
people can still get the message to one degree or the other. But let's go back a second. You said somebody talked to you. Who talked to you?
Well, which part?
With this one right here, you said somebody or something talked to you to guide you into helping you awake.
Well, Jesus has always walked with me, and I've always seen him because he's in his light body. So I feel that
to the viewers, he's always walked with you, and you see
like he
him
looks
in the
like
light body.
like a normal person walking with me.
Really?
Like, to me, I didn't know until I was in kindergarten that other people didn't see him too. So when I went to kindergarten, my first day, my teacher was giving everybody a hug and a handshake. And I grabbed her necklace and I said, I love your daddy's necklace. And she's like, how do you know this is my dad's necklace? And I said, because he just told me. And she was terrified because her father was dead. And so they sent me to the principal's office. And at that moment, I didn't know what I had done wrong.
Right.
But I knew that I did not see the world the same way other people saw. And so at that point, I started to be very careful with the way that I spoke or I watched
information too.
right. Like I watched the world around me to see what was acceptable.
Hmm.
And then I tried to act as best as I could in that way. And normally what didn't really go over well.
You brought up something when you were young and you realized that you were different. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other individuals that had the same experiences, and for fear of maybe, like you said, being crucified, have to tread gently or stuff. When did your third eye, let's get real, when did your third eye start to emerge? When did you start to get more and more enlightened as with this universal knowledge?
Well, I've always remembered what I came here for. Like I can always since the day I was born, I can remember that moment before choosing in. And I remember before going in being like, well, what am I supposed to do there? Like we didn't discuss this basically.
Mhm.
And I heard find your people and stand together. But whatever you do, do not stand alone. And I was like, how will I know that they're my people? And then I was shown all of these lights all over the world that were already here or that were coming. And so that's why I know for sure that the light upon this planet is far greater than the darkness. But the darkness is just that, and there is no separation. There's just there is beings that still have God in them and they're walking in that, even if they have forgotten, and entities that are basically thought forms that we've miscreated that, have influence.
Do we create? I'm glad you brought that up. Now, do we create our own demons in
Yes.
universal connection?
Yeah.
'Cause you said you saw before you got called up to bat, you picked the script, you guys wrote the movie. Now you got to come and play the part out to figure out who do you bring and so forth. But as you
Well, we
looking
don't
down,
really write the movie. Like we write it when we're here
you
because we
write it
don't
over
know
here.
what happens.
Mhm.
But we look at the potentials. So like if you're coming into a world that is governed by law of attraction and polarity, and you're here to teach unconditional love, but you learn through contrast, then you're going to choose into a family where you experience nothing but transactional love and conditional love. And you're going to experience the opposite because it's through that opposite that makes you expand to know your purpose. But like right now, we're seeing this where people are feeling that contrast and they're feeling victimized by it. And then they never get to that other side.
So basically, before you come here, you may want to you may pick a family based on love and all that, but then it's the reverse.
Right.
It's re-engineering.
What your focus is. So like in Jesus's lifetime, it was to come in as Christ and never forget throughout his walk. Never forget, because in his life as Buddha, he was awakening. And then he got to that stage of I'm fully awake now. And now I'm going to come back and do it again, but I'm not going to be like at any part of my journey be asleep. And so we each have our own individual and collective intention for our lives. And so it really just depends on what the individual's desire for, like, for instance, like my daughter, she had a lifetime where, and she'll talk about this, where she just wanted to experience food. And so she came in to just experience food. Like we all have our different purposes. So, and
That makes sense. You need to watch the movie because you know what? Nicolas Cage wanted to experience a deeper sensation of love. It was really tripped out that you said that because he was just overwhelmed by Meg Ryan. But then the reverse engineering came. Yeah, you got the free will. You came down, but you know what? She died.
oh,
As soon as she hit the earth, dog, I told you the movie. But it goes deeper than that. But back to what you were saying, when you're
that's
looking down and you're seeing, is the dark part of humans and before you descend down, is that mainly because they haven't been awakening? You said you can see that they have the universal, but they also have the dark side. Is the dark part of them a combination of the the manifest of troubles, the trying to connect to the creator and themselves, and all of it's not there, so they're not, their light isn't shining as bright, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
right. So like every being that has ever been born and that is on this planet is a child of God. But it's just like when two or more are gathered in Christ, they're untouchable. They can walk through, bullets and miracles happen. But when three or more are gathered in hatred, and that means that, when you're having like a talk about your best friend and gossiping behind their back, the moment that we gather three or more in hatred, we create demonic energies. They're like demonic thought forms. And so it's interesting to experience how people like want to say like the enemy is separated from us, but we created it, you know? So like the enemy is really the ego. It's our
Alter
that
ego.
no, the ego's desire to perpetuate itself as a singularity. That's really the enemy. It's that voice inside of us that says that we're different than the world around us, or that we're better or special or whatever. It's like, it's that voice that the Christ in us has to say, not today, Satan. I am one with all of my brothers and sisters. I don't need to differentiate myself in order to feel special. I don't need to use big words in order to feel special. Like, I am a holy child of God, and that is special enough.
How do we get, two-part question? I know I'm throwing a lot at you with.
No, I love it.
How do we get, I told somebody one time, can good exist without evil? Can there really be an alpha versus an alpha and omega? Can there ever be just good? And my question for that is simple. If the universal spirit is giving me a chance to come, why is he making it so difficult? I mean, you can snap your finger and make everybody love, make everybody not have certain thoughts, because you were the creator. I'm trying to wrap my finger around this, and you was there and you see this. Why all of a sudden do you just say, okay, go down there and do this, when you can
So
just snap your finger and
God
get it
doesn't
done?
hold judgment. So God wouldn't see your perspective and think that you were struggling. Like, God just is. And so would it ever be good without evil? Of course, because God is just good. And it's only because we judge that we have the good versus evil. And it's even in our judgment that something is good versus bad or whatever, that we fall in consciousness. And so that's why it's so important, especially on this planet, to have our focus on God and to like the creator of your soul. What is that light calling you forward? And to be walking towards God while we're living our everyday lives. Like, when we get into relationships and we're so excited, it's because we're feeling God, but we're only feeling a fraction of what God truly is. And then when we get distracted and we start looking at each other and trying to pull energy from one another, it's inevitably going to die. Like, inevitably you're going to run out of energy. So it's like, it's imperative that we are equally yoked and we're both walking home together. And then, you know, we all make it to the kingdom of heaven while we're still on earth.
You said that the individuals here chose to be here. I've heard this before several times, but it's almost like the Matrix. We come into the world, and upon departing, do some people just not get it, or is there a sign, or does something click in the computer that we're programmed to say, okay, well, I'm here for a different purpose? Because evidently a lot of people aren't feeling the same message that we're feeling, that it's not about me. Is
Right.
that making sense? So what is that? Because if they keep coming back, are they not getting the message, and just because they can't remember when they come back? Because, well, let me take it back. Maybe there's a thing called deja vu, where we kind of remember a little bit of some of the stuff that we got. But why do keep constantly coming back, and why do we keep saying we want to come back?
Well, I feel like in order to ascend out of the reincarnation wheel, you have to get to a level of Christ consciousness. And so that's why I say that's where we're all going eventually. So it's either the easy way or the hard way. And every soul has their own journey. But we put people on our paths. We put like little activation codes. Like, sometimes we can go to, you know, and we can, like, you're being called to Greece. Like, I would advise you to go, because there's something there for you. And you can't really know what it is until you go and step foot on that land. And I'm not saying that necessarily like the outside has an influence on our awakening, but it can trigger memories, or you could have left an access code for yourself there, or you're going to meet somebody that's going to remind you of something. It's all like following those breadcrumbs. And I feel like this world is like full of influence. And that's why, I always remembered why I chose here. I didn't always know how I was going to fulfill God's purposes on earth, but like being 2 years old, I would talk about being from God's world and I'm here to change the world and this and this and this. And my grandmother understood. She was a natural healer, and she was very connected to God. And so she would get hit by the Holy Spirit, say that I have the gift of prophecy. And then for my mother to not even be awakened to that, but to name me Kendra, which means prophetess, like it's all connected. So, yeah, I feel like we have to follow those breadcrumbs and not be influenced and be very careful where we're giving our power away.
What do you mean when you say be careful when you're giving your power away?
Like
I
even
could probably talk about it, but you're more
like even in the country
good
that
with
we
it than I
live
am.
in, we have, like with our politics, like it's divided. Like that's missing the mark. That's it's intentional to divide us. And the moment that we have that division, we're creating evil within the world. Like the wars are happening right now because of the wars that are within us all. And so when we live in a country that like is almost like down our throat, like trying to force us to be divisive, it's those types of influences. Even going to a public school, our public schools were not set up for a child to come into this world. I feel that parents have such an attachment to their children of like, okay, I'm going to have this child and it's going to be this, and I'm going to force it to be this. And if it's not, I'm going to punish it. But the child doesn't belong to you. It came through your portal and it's blessing you with its existence, and you get to watch it unfold. But it's only our job as parents to provide our children safety and security and give them all of the tools necessary so they can blossom into whatever kind of flower that they are, plant or tree. But we don't even allow ourselves to like stand back and witness what our children are and let them show us. And so we go to these schools that like indoctrinate us from the very beginning, try to chase us out of our inspiration and try to get us to all be exactly the same. And there's so many of us that are, birds that are forced to go to fish school and they can't understand why they're struggling. It's like we were never meant to be forced into these boxes.
Why do you think, before we wrap up, why do you think you was called off the bench to come here?
Because now is the time where every soul has the opportunity to awaken and remember who they are.
Before we wrap up, we're definitely gonna have you come back with part 2 and part 3 of your journey. And we've talked, I know the journey, and I want to make sure that the viewers know this journey. Before we leave this part of the episode of part 1 of your journey, leave the viewers with something, because you said something when I asked you, why did you come here? What do you think would have happened had you not? Could you have refused?
Yeah, of course I could have. I mean, because it's free will, right? But why would I have even been there if I didn't want to choose in? That's often when we see people have near-death experiences and they say, God told me to go back. Mm-hmm. God didn't tell you. You just remembered what your purpose is and you chose to come back. So it's always a choice.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton